You can't bet win totals on BroThrow, but you can bet on individual games. And today we're going to get you warmed up for the college football season with our Big 12 preseason win totals predictions video. Jake, we're going to make some picks. Are you ready?
I'm ready for it. It's a crazy year in the Big 12. It's the last year for Texas and Oklahoma, and it's the first year in the conference for BYU, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati. So it could be a crazy conference this season.
It's a one-time deal. We'll never see it again. I'm going to start this off with the Kansas over. I absolutely loved this play last year. I think the over was only 3, so we hit that in September. But I love it just as much now. You've got Lance Leipold going into year 3, and he returns an offense that averaged 438 yards and 35 points per game, and they did it with a backup QB for 5 games. They lose one starter on offense, but here's what they've got coming back. Their top 5 wide receivers, their top 2 tight ends, their top 2 quarterbacks, their top 2 running backs, and an offensive line who added 2 transfers from the portal who are either going to start or at least rotate. Devin Neal ran for 1,000 yards last year and he went for 6 yards a carry, but so did Daniel Highshaw before he got hurt. And Jalen Daniels is one of the best QBs in the Big 12, and I bet you if he would have played the entire season, there'd be an argument that he was a better returner than Ewers and Gabriel. But even if something happens to him, since he's a key cog in this wheel, they've got an elite backup in Jason Bean. And it's hard to say that because most schools have really mediocre backups. But Jason Bean was pretty electric, even though he didn't win that many games. This offense is 100% taking a step forward. And the real question mark is going to be on defense. And this is the reason that their team doesn't have an 8-win total projection right now. The defense was giving up 35 points a game, and they ranked 124th nationally. That's ugly. They return all 7 starters at linebacker and DB, but they don't have any of their linemen coming back. They've got to replace all 4 starters on the line. Fortunately, they play in the Big 12, and the back 7 is probably a little bit more important than the front 4. But this is still a team who ranked in the bottom 10 of almost every major category nationally on defense, so they need to make some improvements if they're going to get to 7 wins. The schedule is pretty fair. They've got 2 free wins in Missouri State and Nevada, so they've just got to win 4 of their 8 toss-ups to push. Illinois, BYU, UCF, Texas Tech, and Kansas State are all at home. I wouldn't be surprised if they won 3 of those and then just pull off a couple of road wins against Cincinnati, Iowa State, or Oklahoma State. And Lance Leipold will be in a positive situation with a 7-win team in year 3. What are your thoughts on the over here?
I was really surprised that Kansas was able to retain Leipold. I thought he was going to be one of the hottest coaching candidates and was due to jump ship, but he didn't. He stayed, and they got to manage to keep Jalen Daniels. And I don't think you needed to qualify your statement earlier. I think Jalen Daniels is definitely the best returning quarterback in the Big 12. The guy is absolutely electric. He's a great passer. He's a great runner. Kansas's offense is definitely going to take a step forward, as you said, just due to the continuity. And I find it hard to believe they're going to be worse than they were last year. So I really like to look at over 6.
Yeah, the 6 makes no sense to me. That should at least be over 7. So I'm taking it while I got it. Your first pick is Cincinnati under 5.5.
As I said in the intro, this is the first year in the Big 12 for Cincinnati, and moving from a conference like the AAC to the Big 12 means a massive jump up in competition. And Cincinnati has lost a lot of talent from the last 2 seasons. This is no longer the same team that made it to the college football playoff. They've lost Desmond Ridder. They've now even lost Ben Bryant, who was their quarterback last year. He's at Northwestern. They've brought in Emory Jones, who has been very middling to disappointing his entire career. They lost their leading rusher from last season and their top 2 receivers from last season. And why did they lose so many of their players? Because they lost their head coach, Luke Fickell. He's off at the University of Wisconsin. Cincinnati's now coming to a much tougher conference, undermanned, and they don't have the leader that they haven't had the last couple seasons. I think it's going to be too difficult for Cincinnati to find their bearing with all this talent going out. They had 23 transfers out, one of the most of any schools in the entire country. And they're just not going to be able to get enough wins in this more difficult conference. I'm taking the under all day here. Their schedule is too difficult for the talent that they have.
Like you said, Fickle's gone. They lost all that talent. I don't know how you go to a better conference and expect to win right away when they were already regressing off that playoff appearance. So I'll probably ride the under with you. Say they don't make a bowl game. Next, I've got Texas Tech over 7.5 at plus odds, which is ridiculous to think because Joey McGuire in his first season finished the year on a 4-game win streak and a bowl win over Lane Kiffin to go 8-5. Now this team returns 14 starters and they only need to exceed their win total by 1 game this year if they're going to cover. Check out the offense. They ranked 22nd nationally last season, and they returned Tyler Shuck at QB, Taj Brooks at running back, and their top 5 receivers. But wait, there's more. They also added Drake McCray from Austin P, who had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. The offensive line was a big issue. I know it was a big thing we talked about because they didn't have the depth and there were a ton of injuries. But this year they've got 2 guys coming in. Starting center from I think Western Kentucky, who was top 10 in the portal and somehow Texas Tech managed to pick him up. And then Cole Spencer, who's coming back off injury, didn't get to play last year, but was another guy who was all Conference USA that they pulled out of the portal back in 2022. They averaged 460 yards per game, and they were the second best offense in the Big 12 last year. And with a second-year staff to tighten things up, the sky's the limit for them. Now on defense, they did lose Tyree Wilson, who went 7th overall in the draft, but they returned their 2 other tackles who could both be drafted next year. They led the Big 12 in sacks with 31 and ranked 9th nationally in red zone D, but other than that, they're pretty average in all the other major categories. The Texas Tech media seems to think that the D is going to get better than it was in 2022, and they did add 3 transfers at tackle, linebacker, and safety who can all rotate and give them more depth. But overall, this is an 8, 9, maybe even 10-win team if this staff can really get in their rhythm in year 2. You've only got 3 free wins in Wyoming, BYU, and Tarleton State, but I wouldn't say there's a single guaranteed loss on this schedule. Their other tough games, I guess you can say, are Kansas State, TCU, and Oregon. But honestly, those are all at home, and playing in Lubbock is not an easy place to win. So I love the over here, and I would say this is a potential contender for the Big 12 championship. What are your thoughts on them?
I think that matchup against Oregon in week 2 is going to be huge. It's at Lubbock. You got to think that Texas Tech might even be favored in that game over a much higher ranked Oregon team. I think they're going to have a good chance to win that game. And even if they lose, that's going to show the coaches where their program's at, what they still need to work on. And then they get 2 weeks off with the Tarleton game, which is, as you said, a free game to improve those things when they get into the Big 12 schedule.
Your next pick is Iowa State under 5.5. This is plus odds.
Yeah, another plus odds pick. Iowa State last in the Big 12 last season. So they've been kind of trending down. They had a lot of success under Matt Campbell in his first number of seasons at Iowa State. But look at some of the guys that he had. David Montgomery at running back, Breece Hall at running back, and Brock Purdy for 4 years at quarterback. Brock Purdy, turns out he's pretty good at this whole football thing. So how much of it can we really attribute to Campbell, and how much of it can we attribute to the previous players who are no longer there? By it, I mean Iowa State's previous success. This season, they only have 4 Big 12 home games. Incredibly difficult schedule, a lot of difficult opponents to go against. They have to go against Texas, TCU, Kansas, Oklahoma State. I mean, they only get 2 of the newcomers, and they have to play 7 of the 8 top finishers from last season's Big 12. I don't know. I just don't know where the talent and production are going to come from. They lost their number 1 wide receiver. The entire team as a whole only has 4 transfers that have come in. And I'm just not really a big believer in Matt Campbell after seeing how the team has kind of gone on a downhill the last few years. They're really missing Brock Purdy, and I think under 5.5 is it's too much. 5 to 6 wins is too much to ask for this team. They don't have the talent.
I saw a stat last season that said Matt Campbell has more losses than he does wins in those close games. It was similar to a Scott Frost stat, and that's why I was looking at it since Matt Campbell was a potential hire for Nebraska. I don't think that Matt Campbell has the momentum he had in those first seasons at Iowa State. And because that momentum is starting to get lost, the recruiting's not as strong. Fans aren't as excited because there isn't enough momentum. And I'm going to ride here on the under with you. Next up, I got Oklahoma State over 6.5, again at plus odds. And people are sleeping on Mike Gundy. But this is the year he gets his team back to 8. Promise you. Spencer Sanders is gone, but they brought in a quarterback who's going to be efficient in the Big 12. Alan Bowman came from Michigan, but before that, he was at Texas Tech, where as a true freshman, he threw for over 2,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. He was not a fit in the Big 10, but in the Big 12, he can maximize his skill set. He's got an offensive line that returns 4 starters, and they added a legit tackle from the portal, so they're not going to be an issue. The receiving core already has most of their weapons, but they also added in Washington State's number 1 receiver and Arlen Bruce from Iowa, who's a stud that just didn't get enough touches because their offense wasn't very good. The question marks are going to be at running back since the entire room only went for 1,100 yards last year, but my guess is they're going to bolster that group, and this offense is going to be pretty efficient. Again, I'm betting on the offense here to get to 7 wins because the defense has not proven anything. They've got a new DC from a D2 school, question marks there since we haven't gotten to see what his defense looks like, but they are running a 3-3-5. We know what that's like, and in the Big 12, it seemed to work. You've got All-American safety, Kendall Daniels returning, and Colin Oliver, who's a future draft pick at linebacker. My guess is the defense is going to be okay. They're going to find ways to get scrappy, and we're betting again on the offense to carry this team to 7. You've got 2 free wins in South Alabama and Central Arkansas, 2 losses on Kansas State and Oklahoma, but that gives you 8 toss-up games, and if you can win 5 of those 8 toss-ups, they've got a pretty good chance. On the road at West Virginia, on the road at UCF, and on the road at Arizona State are 3 where they could close this total out, so give me the over. Oklahoma State's going to get back to that 8-win mark and show us or remind us why Mike Gundy is one of the best coaches in the Big 12.
I love how Oklahoma State's schedule pans out this year. They get all 4 of the newcomers to the conference, and Iowa State and West Virginia, the bottom 2 finishers in the conference last season. Then, as you said, they got some tough games against Oklahoma, Kansas, and Kansas State, but all 3 are at home. I think they're going to have a chance in almost every single game this season. Over 6.5. As long as Gundy can get the quarterback right, which he's known to be a QB whisperer, so I think he's going to be able to do that, and I definitely like them to go over 6.5.
You've got Kansas State over 7.5, and these odds aren't too good, but I love Kansas State.
Yeah, it's a heavy, heavy juice, minus 188 on FanDuel, but it's that heavy for a reason. They had 9 wins last season. You only have to get 8 this season, and now you're going to get a full season of Will Howard at quarterback. Season Kansas State started off with Adrian Martinez, and Adrian is a good quarterback, but Will Howard came in and showed out, and he was incredibly impressive to me. When he took over, the team really went above and beyond into another level. Now they got a full year of him back. Chris Kleiman is returning for his 5th season. Kansas State has gone over 7.5, 3 out of the 4 seasons for Kleiman. The only season they didn't was the COVID-shortened season, which, I mean, even percentage-wise, they were under, but still, 3 out of 4 over. And don't forget, he was the coach at North Dakota State when they had Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, and won like a ton of national championships on the D2 level, accumulating a 67-6 career record there. So this is a guy who's had success at everywhere he's coached. The team is, they did lose a lot of production, but they did well in the transfer portal. Their top recruit coming in from the transfer class is a running back from Florida State to replace Deuce Vaughn. And I just believe that the team is too solid, too well coached, and the schedule is easy enough that they should be able to soar over 7.5 and honestly probably be closer to 9 or 10 wins.
Well, when you look at a Chris Kleiman team, you look at the offensive line, the toughness, the defense, and I think that's something that you build, and you don't have to worry about guys leaving because you'll always be able to recruit and develop more guys who fit that bill. I'm a big believer in Kleiman. I'm a big believer in Kansas State, and I'm going to ride this over with you. But thank you, Jake, for your picks, and I'm going to see you in the next one.
Absolutely. Peace out.